keep Americans in suspense after November 3rd of this year.
Campaigning, fundraising, debates, more fundraising, 2 conventions, more debates, and finally, the vote. The U.S. presidential election happens every 4 years on the first Tuesday in November, but Election Day is really just the last step in a years-long process. It starts with the primary, when states vote on who should be the nominee for each political party. There are 2 major political parties that most Americans identify with, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The Republican Party is considered to be on the right of the political spectrum, supporting positions considered more conservative, while the Democrats fall on the left, supporting positions considered more liberal. Every summer, before the election, the 2 parties hold week-long events called conventions to officially select their nominee. Each state will send delegates to the conventions who act as representatives of the results from the primary.
50 votes for Secretary Clinton and 9 votes for Senator Sanders.
The candidate who wins the majority of those delegates then accepts the nomination. Even the sitting president has to be re-nominated by their party.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
But if he or she has already served 2 terms, they can't run again. Once the nominees are secured, it's on to the general election. Although the nominees may attack each other as they campaign, they won't actually face off until the debates a month before the election. When it's finally time to vote, there are 3 ways to do it: by mail-in ballot for those who can't make it to the polls, by early voting, which happens days or weeks before Election Day, and by going to the polls on Election Day. Historically, only about 50 to 60% of eligible Americans actually turn out to vote. In the United States, the candidate with a majority of the votes doesn't automatically win. The U.S. uses a system called the Electoral College, which gives each state a certain amount of electoral votes. The amount of electoral votes a state gets is determined by how many representatives they have in Congress. If a candidate gets the most votes in a state, they get the electoral votes for that state, except in Nebraska and Maine, where they are awarded based on statewide and district results. You need 270 out of 538 electoral votes to become president. Some states have historically voted Republican and are called red states. Others have historically voted Democratic and are called blue states. Some states are swing states, which means voters have swung between Democrats and Republicans depending on the election year. In a normal year, if the election is a landslide, the results could get called shortly after polling stations close in the evening.
Thank you.
But if it's close, candidates won't give their victory or concession speeches until the wee hours of the morning. If it's super close, candidates can request a recount in certain states. In 2000, George Bush won the state of Florida by just about 1,700 votes. After a recount, it was only 327, and ultimately, the Supreme Court had to weigh in to certify the results. Because of COVID-19, mail-in voting is expected to increase and states are facing challenges, like shortages of poll workers. It may take some states days or weeks to finalize their results. After all of that, the winner is sworn in the following January, and almost immediately people start preparing for the next election.
10-second trivia. Which of these NASA missions was launched in 1977? Skylab, Galileo, Voyager, or Viking? 2 unmanned spacecraft were launched as part of the Voyager missions in 1977. And both of them are still out there, farther away from the Earth than Pluto, still gathering info about the universe more than 40 years after they launched. The cost of the mission, when converted to today's dollars, is roughly $2 billion, and it's not just sending data back. The 2 spacecraft are also carrying info about Earth. Gold-plated copper discs with instructions for how to play them are also on board Voyager in case they're picked up by anything that wants to know about human life. Researchers say that's very unlikely. They compare the discs to a tiny message in a bottle thrown into the greatest expanse of oceans. But they include greetings in 55 languages, music, natural and man-made sounds. They also have pictures, snapshots of human life in the 1970s, including this one from the 1972 Olympics, a depiction of human sport through a foot race. And when CNN anchor Don Riddell caught up with the athletes in the shot, he found that some of them had no idea their images were floating in deep space. The voyage continues.
Could not explain to know what was in our own solar system.
until Voyager.
Whoops. Jeez.
Researchers say that's very unlikely. They compare the discs to a tiny message in a bottle thrown into the great extent of trees. But they include greetings in 55 languages, music with natural and man-made sounds. They also have pictures and snapshots of human life in the 1970s, including this one from the 1972 Olympics, a depiction of human sport through a foot race. And when CNN anchor Don Riddell caught up with the Appleseed shot, he found that some of them had no idea their images were floating in deep space. The voyage continues.
We could not have claimed to know what was in our own solar system until Voyager conducted its tour, its Homeric odyssey across the outer solar system.
People often describe it as one of mankind's greatest journeys.
It is certainly the farthest and the longest. Voyager was originally